Hey Tank, I hear some of you ask. Why are you making a video about the 1660 Ti? Didn't that thing launch like a billion years ago? Well no, actually, it launched like a year ago. And don't look at me in that tone of voice. Okay, I know, I'm a bit late to the party here. But in my defense, a lot of people are still buying 1660 Ti's. And in this video, I'm gonna tell them to stop it. Stop it, just stop it right now. See, back around this time last year, the 1660 Ti was actually a really decent deal at its launch price of $280. But kinda like my employment status, a lot of things have changed since then. And exactly like my employment situation, it was not for the better. At least if you're me or a 1660 Ti. But before we get into all of that, let's just reacquaint ourselves with the 1660 Ti by going over its specs and seeing what it's got in our benchmark run. Oh, and quick side note, I will be leaving affiliate links to everything I mentioned in the video down in the description down below. So if you want to buy your thing and support the channel while you're at it, just jump right into it. Anyway, just like the rest of Nvidia's current gen consumer GPUs, the 1660 Ti is built on the Turing architecture, only with the stuff that makes the RTX card so expensive ripped out. Those mainly being Nvidia's ray tracing cores and DLSS support. What hasn't been ripped out are the card's 1536 CUDA cores with a base clock speed of 1500 MHz and a boost clock of 1770 MHz. Along with that, it also ships with 6 gigs of GDDR6 memory clocked in at 12 GB per second with a 192-bit bus and 288 GB per second memory bandwidth. And lastly, Nvidia's reference design 1660 Ti features a max TDP of 120 watts. But we're not actually working with the reference design here. We're working with MSI's Gaming X 1660 Ti, and it ships with all the specs we just looked at and then takes them up a notch. Our Gaming X version features a very healthy overclock right out of the box with a core boost clock of 1875 MHz, 105 MHz faster than Nvidia's design. To accommodate that overclock, MSI had to push the card's max TDP up to 130 watts, which shouldn't really matter thanks to the Gaming X's beastly cooler design. And while we're on that topic, if you've watched any of my other coverage of the current gen Gaming X designs, then I'm sorry. But you know I'm gonna have to gush about them yet again. MSI's Gaming X designs for this generation are awesome. The card is extremely well put together with materials that just feel premium because they are, and the whole thing feels like a cohesive unit rather than a few random cheap parts slapped on top of a GPU. The cooling built into this thing is mighty impressive too. With the same new Torx 3.0 fans as seen in the rest of the lineup, a reasonably thick GPU heatsink, and a close quarters heatsink that handles the cooling for the memory modules. But as with all of MSI's new Gaming X cards, the real standout here, at least in my opinion, is sex appeal. That's right, I said it. I'd frick a graphics card. I absolutely adore the silver, black, and gray color scheme MSI went for, along with the striking gamery face of the card and the refined brushed metal aluminium backplate adorned with subtle MSI branding. It has this weird business in the back, party in the front kind of vibe going for it, and I am totally down with it. Just like I'm down with its 5 RGB lighting zones. All 5 zones are perfectly diffused as ever, avoiding that whole stepping effect where you can make out exactly where each individual LED is, and they're all bright enough to stand out while not also being super obnoxious. They're also fully customizable, and if you're some kind of weirdo who doesn't like RGB, yes, you can turn the lighting off completely, and the card would still look dope AF. What you can turn off, however, is the card's performance. Or I guess you can if you just unplug it or don't buy the card at all. Anyway, let's just get into the benchmarks. For this run, we're using our old reliable 7700K system clocked at 4.8 GHz, MSI Z270 Gaming Pro Carbon motherboard, 16 gigs of 2667 MHz memory, with cooling handled by Cooler Master's Master Liquid ML240R RGB, all dropped into MSI's Gunrear 100 case with all external panels removed for optimal airflow. And first up, we started things off with 2 runs of Unigen's Super Precision benchmark, one at 1080p using the high preset and another at 1440p. Super Precision is a fairly demanding benchmark, but at 1080p the card had almost no trouble sticking to 61 FPS on average, with very steady 1% and 0.1% lows. It also got a score of 8,189. The card understandably struggled a little more at 1440p with an average of 39 FPS, but delivered some of the most solid 1% and 0.1% lows I've ever seen in this benchmark, ending in a score of 5,231. Next up is Shadow of the Tomb Raider using the high preset. And at 1080p the card performed better than expected with an average of 73 FPS with respectable lows. The game didn't struggle too much at 1440p either using the same quality settings, averaging 57 FPS with very similar lows. My new favorite benchmark is up next, in the form of Doom Eternal, and the card absolutely dominated at 1080p with an average FPS of 150, with lows never even coming close to 60 FPS. That's what we like to see! At 1440p, the game did take a relatively sizable performance hit, averaging 98 FPS with fairly consistent 1% and 0.1% lows. On to esports. Apex is up first, and at 1080p using the high preset, the game averaged 116 FPS with more than acceptable lows, while the switch to 1440p sees the card averaging 97 FPS with similarly good lows. Overwatch was the card's highest performer at 1080p using the high preset, which saw the card managing an average FPS of 191, with lows never going lower than 100. Even at 1440p, the game ran like an absolute dream, with an average FPS of 141 and similarly impressive 1% lows. Now, even though it's my least favorite benchmark by far, the card still handled Fortnite like a pro, averaging 143 FPS with boring 1% and 0.1% lows. Though that's boring in a good way, because they're just not bad. The switch to 1440p hardly had much of an effect on the game, with the card pulling out an average of 138 FPS with similarly boring lows. Now, looking at these benchmarks, it's obvious that the 1660 Ti is a more than capable mid-range monster that should be able to handle pretty much any game you throw at it at 1080p with pretty much max settings. And even though it's not really built for it, the card is still a pretty decent 1440p performer, although you'll definitely have to turn down and optimize your quality settings for it, depending on the game of course. Partly thanks to the out-of-the-box overclock of the MSI Gaming X version, this particular 1660 Ti was able to hit and even surpass that 2 GHz barrier, maxing out at 2010 MHz without any other overclocking applied. The Gaming X's cooler held its own fairly well too, with temps maxing out at 79 degrees, with fans maxing out at 74% or 2,527 RPM. At that speed, the card does tend to tip towards the annoying end of the noise scale, but if I had all the side panels on the system itself, it wouldn't have been nearly as bad. Now, if you're following the specs and the numbers we've seen so far, this seems like a really solid card. And it definitely is. The 1660 Ti was, and still is, a great card for high-fidelity 1080p gaming. So why the heck am I telling people not to buy this thing? Well, because so far we've covered pretty much every aspect of this particular card, except for one tiny but still major detail: price. As I mentioned at the start of this video, the 1660 Ti first launched more than a year ago, and the price Nvidia slapped on it back then was $279. Fast forward to right now, the cheapest, and I repeat, the cheapest new 1660 Ti I could find is currently selling for that exact same price. Actually, it's even a little more than that at $279.99. That pricing is an absolute joke. Back when the card first launched, that price was fine. There was no competition to outshine, so why not? But since then, the competition and the level of performance on offer in this price range has exploded. Even though AMD is still struggling to compete with Nvidia in the high end of the market, they're more than making up for it in the low and mid-tier options. The RX 5600 being a prime example here. For $10 less than the cheapest 1660 Ti, you can grab a 5600 XT, which should on average outperform Nvidia's card by about 9 or 10%. And if you don't mind going a little old school and want 8GB of HBM2 memory, the RX Vega 56 should be a far more attractive option at $250, especially while outperforming the 1660 Ti by about 6%. And if you want to get a little technical and probably avoid your warranty, you might even be able to upgrade that Vega 56 to a Vega 64 just by flashing a different BIOS on it, which should boost that performance even more. Even if AMD isn't your jam at all and you would ride and die for Team Green, the 1660 Ti still makes 0 sense to buy right now. And that's because Nvidia silently assassinated the 1660 Ti just 8 months after it was born with the release of the 1660 Super. A card with pretty much identical performance to the 1660 Super, but can currently be found everywhere for as low as $230. That's a $50 price difference. And just to put a final nail in the coffin here, if you're in the 1660 Ti's current price range of $280 and can manage to stretch your budget just a tiny bit, just do yourself and your frame rates a massive favor and just get a 2060. The 2060 can be found for as low as $300 right now, completely annihilates the 1660 Ti by about 20% or so in raw performance, and comes standard with RTX and DLSS capabilities. And let's not forget that new cards from both AMD and Nvidia are coming, and coming fast. And when they get here, the entire battlefield will shift once again, and likely in a big way. So with all of that out of the way, what was the point of this video? I and the regulars on this channel know that the 1660 Ti is old news, isn't exactly super, and aren't in any kind of rush to buy one. But like I said at the start of this video, there are still some people who are actually buying these things, and if I can steer even one of them away to something better, then why not? And I also figure that I should end this video right here. So lightly tap that like button if you like the video, get subscribed for more almost entirely pointless but still totally important videos, and enable all notifications just because. If you want to help the channel out directly and get your name in the credits of all my upcoming videos, do check out my Patreon, it's linked down below. And then finally, I just wanted to check in on everyone who made it this far into the video. Things here in South Africa are getting pretty wild with our nationwide lockdown thing being extended by another 2 weeks, and I'm betting it's going to be extended even more than that. And just everything is becoming more and more uncertain, and it's kind of scary. But even though I'm worried that things here will get a lot worse than they already are, I know a lot of you are already in countries that have been and are currently more affected than we are. And all I can say is that I honestly hope that all of you and the people you love are fine, are staying safe, aren't going too insane by boredom or fear or any of that. And I don't know, things are just very weird, but I really do hope to see all of you guys in the next video. Anyway, I'm done. Have a good one. Enjoy your things, and I'll see you guys. Yeah. Goodbye.